Hey, everybody, it's Pastor Tony. So good to have you tuning in. I pray that you're having a great week, and my prayer, as always, is that it gets even better. Again, we're in Luke chapter 8. I want to jump right into this. We were talking about the man that had the legion of demons last week. And if you didn't get a chance to hear that, just pop back over here, look, watch last week's YouTube. And we want to pick this right up. Jesus had cast the demons out of the man. They'd gone into a bunch of pigs. The pigs went over the cliff and they drowned. And so here we see this man. I'm going to pick this up in verse 35, Luke 8:35. And it says, Then they went out to see what had happened and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Now, here's the thing. I didn't bring it up last week, but they were afraid. Let me help you with something. You're going to have some friends. And when you you step into your greatness, you start moving to your purpose, you go back to school, you find a new job, you're going to switch careers, or you tell them you want to do something better, or even might take a vacation, go somewhere that maybe they're not used to, you can frighten them. Let me tell you what happens. People get used to you being in a certain place, and then they base their life and their relationship on you with that. And God bless them. You may have some friends that are afraid as you continue to go, get into Christ. You want to go to the next level. You want to do some things, and they're like, they can't handle it. It's okay, because that's what happened with this man here. But now I want to show you something what Jesus said here. Okay. Verse 36, they also who had seen it told them by what means he who had been demon possessed was healed. Verse 37, then the whole multitude of the surrounding region of the Gadarenes asked Jesus to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. It really helps me that some people love dysfunction. One of the things I try to do as a pastor is to create a functional environment, and dysfunctional people can't stand it. I don't have to ask them to leave the church. They'll leave on their own, because dysfunctional people love dysfunction. I watch people who move to normalcy, who are used to a dysfunction, they can't handle it. They will self-sabotage. Some people just have to start mess. Just messy people. God bless them. God bless them. And that's what I think these people were. And it says here, and he got into the boat and returned. Verse 38. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you. And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. This man had gotten delivered, and the man wanted to follow Jesus, get in a boat, and just hang out with Jesus. But Jesus had an assignment for him. And so he had to go out and tell others, because everybody I think I said last time or time before, I just imagine this guy named Larry running up through the cemetery naked, modern day, cutting himself and screaming and all that. And we would think about this guy. And if Larry gets healed and delivered, everybody in my town will be talking about Larry and his deliverance. And so sometimes too, what the devil has meant for evil, God can turn that into good. And so we see this guy, and Jesus required him, you still got to go and be a testimony. You got to go and be a witness for me. And the thing too is that this was outside the region of Galilee, where all the disciples were used to. And if you notice something, even like with the centurion who had built a synagogue for the Jews, Jesus was constantly reaching out to those who were not Jews. And so I'm a big proponent of international missions, going across cultures and winning others. And we can see Jesus as he was even teaching his disciples that, because what happens with a lot of us, we can become ethnocentric. We can think our denomination is the best. You think your church is the only one that's, the members of your church are the only ones that's going to heaven. You got to be careful of that. You really have to be careful about that. Okay. So let's go to verse 40. And it says here, so it was when Jesus returned. So he went back to, the Galilee area. So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. So he got him on the other side. They're like, Jesus got to come back. Okay, we got some things we want to do, things we need him to help us with. Here's one in particular, verse 41. And behold, there came a man named Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet. And that's important too, going back to humbling yourself. We talked about the woman that was this notorious sinner, had entered the Pharisee's house, but she had humbled herself, and she was washing Jesus' feet with her tears and using her hair. We need to humble ourselves, okay? So this ruler of the synagogue, he humbled himself and begged Jesus to come to his house. Verse 42, for he had an only daughter, one child, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. I mentioned before, one of the most difficult things is to lose a child. It says, but as he went, the multitudes thronged him. There was multitudes, people all around him. Verse 43, now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years. Now we got a girl 12 years old. And we got a woman who has an issue of blood for 12 years. She had been on a menstrual cycle for 12 years. I'm a man, never had a menstrual cycle. I can only go by what I've heard about it. And each woman has a different experience, if you would. Some are so severe. Some, I've heard some stories, especially being a pastor, in terms of hospitalization and medication and things that are needed. But here's this woman, for 12 years, she's been on a cycle. And there's this little girl who's 12 years of age. I like to go back 12 years from this moment here with Jesus. This woman, she begins her cycle, begins her menstrual cycle, not knowing that it's going to continue for the next 12 years. And she's going to be in pain and sorrow. Then you got Jairus, who 12 years prior, his wife gives birth. He's about to have 12 years of joy. And both of these people, this synagogue ruler who has this great joy, he's going to need Christ. This woman who's about to have 12 years of pain and sorrow, she's about to go broke, spending all of her money. They're on opposite tracks, but both of them will need Jesus. And I want you to understand, our job as Christians is no matter where someone is. You may have some friends that are like Jairus when his wife first gave birth to his daughter. Celebrating, everything is great. You might say, I don't need to talk to him about church. But here's the thing. I always tell my congregation, you don't wait until it rains to buy an umbrella. You got to run outside or run to the store. You're going to get wet. You think ahead of time. Rich people need Jesus too. Even when everything is going just great, you never know when a storm might arise. And I love this thing about Jairus because he knew to come to Christ and to humble himself. And that's what he did. And so we pick this up here. Verse 43, now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. Now, what I like about this version, especially if you read it in Mark's version, it says that she kept saying within herself. Remember, we talked about out of the abundance of the heart. We talked about what you meditate on, what you're saying to yourself, about having ears to hear. And I mentioned to you about self-talk. The Bible tells us in Mark's version of the story that she kept saying to herself, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, if I can only touch the hem of his garment. Her faith rose up in her so much so that when she touched Jesus' garment, she pulled virtue, power out of him. You know, this is that power, and it's dunamis in Greek, that dynamic, or it's where we get the word dynamite. She pulled that power out of him. She drew it out of him by her faith because she kept saying. And, earlier, we see Jesus talking about faith, and he's saying, according to your faith being unto you, you have great faith, or you have little faith. But here this woman, and she kept saying to herself, now I like this woman because of this, okay? 12 years of sorrow, 12 years of spending all of her money. You would think she would give up. You would think she would just, I can't do this anymore. I can't go any further. But somehow or another, she pulled it together, rose up. And that's what I want you to do, my brothers and sisters. Maybe you've been at it a long time, and you see Jairus, he's bold, he comes, and, he says right before everybody, hey, I need you to come, to heal my daughter. This woman, because she had been on a menstrual cycle, she was not allowed to be out in public. If you think about 12 years of being ostracized, 12 years of living alone, 12 years of just dealing with this and going broke, but somehow or another, she got her hope back, she believed again, and she rose up and she said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment. When we're going to keep reading in this, you're going to find later on that then that became kind of the norm. People would just press in just to touch his garment because she set a precedent. I think about it. What are you telling yourself about Jesus? Are you limiting yourself to what you've just seen? I really have learned to believe he can do exceedingly abundantly above all I can ask or think. And that's the zone that's the space I want you to begin to enter into. That he can do, according to Ephesians 3:20, God will do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. Well, just how high can you think? Whatever your situation is. So you could have 12 years of joy, and then all of a sudden, it's being taken away from you. You could have 12 years of sorrow. And right there, God can bring an end to that pain that you're experiencing. So no matter where you are, God is the answer. Jesus is the solution. And I want to encourage you all to fully, fully embrace him. No matter where you are, he's here for you. God bless you all. I cannot wait to meet with you again next week to continue this study.